All right, welcome back. Happy Monday, I guess. We'll see what happens. More and more states are beginning to open up or are about to open up certain portions of their full society, business, financial, economic, social. We'll see. Meanwhile, the communist government and governor in California is enraged about all those people who went to the beach over the weekend. The guy's really on an agenda. California it's gone. Just completely gone. Very sad to see. There are a number of headlines that are well worth reading, and we hope you'll read them all each day. If you don't read the stories, just read the headlines. Headlines going up in just a few minutes. There is one thing I want to do before I bring on my first guest. I want to play a small clip from a video that I have up right now. I'm going to actually pull it up in the new batch right there in the second position. First story is very sad. A very dedicated, total professional emergency room doctor in Manhattan could no longer tolerate the horrors she was seeing and dealing with and killed herself. She's gone. Earlier, an EMT, a 23-year-old young man, took his own life as well. The grief of these professionals, and I'm not speaking about all health professionals because we know in many hospitals there's not much going on. Most of the severe patients are staying home or are already admitted, so there's not a big line at the door, as it were. New York is the epicenter of all of this, and that story is 49-year-old woman, professional, doctor, giving her life to help others, could no longer do it and took her own life. Now, this is a video I'm going to move up and actually put underneath that story. It is about a nurse who is going public on behalf of a friend of hers who apparently was brought into New York to help out with the crushing burden there. And what her friend has told her is what is contained in this video. And it's titled Insane Murder Going On in New York City Hospitals. RN Discloses. Let me just play about a minute and a half of this so you can get an idea. And again, this video is up right now. It will be up in the second position in just a few minutes. So I'm going to play this right now. Here we go.
The patients don't know any better. They don't have family with them. There is no one there with them to advocate for them. So they are scared and they give consent. The ventilators have high PEEP, high pressure, which then causes barotrauma. It causes trauma to the lungs.
Okay, did you hear that? This is really important. And I've read this before. I'm not a doctor, but I'm tired of reading that ventilators are not the answer in a lot of cases, that they do damage the lungs, and once people go on ventilators, 85-90% of them never come off. And there are people who think ventilation is not the best way to go. I'll go back to the video.
Cameron Kyle Siddell, a few weeks ago, put out a video. He's in New York City, and he put out a video saying something is not right, like we're not treating this correctly. We're doing something wrong. This doesn't make sense. They pulled his video from YouTube and they took him out of ICU because they couldn't have one doctor going against the grain, going against their protocol. The protocol is propofol or some kind of sedation because they're on the ventilator, and IV antibiotics. There's no hydroxychloroquine. They're not using that combination with Zithromax. They're not using zinc, vitamin C, high doses of vitamins A and D. They laugh. This is what she's told me. They laugh at that. She says, this is a nightmare. It's out of a horror movie, and I don't want to be a part of this. There are people who are a full code, and yet, if they crash, they're not doing compressions because it will spread the virus.
Heart compressions for a code. Code meaning heart stoppage.
Full code, not doing compressions. Family is not there. They have no one to answer to. No one is being held accountable. A code was called and no one came. So sometimes they're not even resuscitating people. Again, left to rot and die. They're not given blood because we know that the blood is not oxygenated in these COVID patients. We know that.
Okay, now that brings up the other big issue. Is it the lungs that are not oxygenating the blood, or is it the blood that is no longer, via the red cells, able to carry oxygen to the cells of the body and major organ systems? That's a debate that doesn't make news and should be widely talked about. We talk about it here. All right, here we go. Back here, just a little bit more of this.
There are doctors all around the world sounding the alarms. These are the drugs that work. This is the pathophysiology of the disease. This is what's happening. And for some reason, it's not changing. Even though we know, some of us know what's going on, nothing is changing on the front lines. They stay in the same PPE all shift, except for the top pair of gloves. So 2 pairs of gloves, or I don't know, maybe more than 2, but they're only changing the gloves on the outside. Gown, mask, whatever else stays the same because all patients are COVID patients. So if it's a COVID floor, it's all COVID, but it's not because some of them are rule out COVID. So even if they're rule out COVID and they're not COVID, they're going to get COVID because they're using the same PPE all shift and they're carrying that contamination to all of the patients. They're not changing their PPE. They're not going into rooms. So they're running long tubing into the room so that they can manage the tubing from outside of the rooms. So if they're not going into the rooms, that means they're not assessing the patients as frequently as you would be otherwise assessing your patients. They are not doing rapid result tests. You're lucky if you get results in 5 days.
Okay, I'll stop it there. You'll be able to look at the whole thing. Now, this is not to say that all hospitals are like this description that you're hearing. It's called a horror movie. That's what she calls it. And that's directly from her friend who is working right in the midst of it. So my thoughts about people who get sick, unless you are prepared to go into the hospital and actually lose all rights to choose the treatment you want, to lose your family, to lose your support, no one can visit you. And furthermore, no one can get you out of there. You're stuck in there until they decide to release you. This is a pandemic. So I know if I ever were unfortunate and became ill, the last place I'd want to be would be in the hospital. Most especially if the blood is not delivering the oxygen. And I'm facing the prospect of being put on a ventilator and suffering lung damage from that. So these are things to consider. There are lots of things out there that are not being discussed that should be fully discussed. And this nurse's description of what her friend is going through, on top of the ER doctor in Manhattan that just killed herself because of the horrors in trying to help deal with this, should give all of you pause for great concern when it comes time to decide, gee, I'm sick, I'm going to go to the hospital. I wouldn't go on a bet, personally. That's just me. I'll take care of myself. Now, speaking of that, we have a friend who's been on the program several times before. His name is Joe Cimino. He is an employee. He works for the Transportation Department in New York. He was supposed to be on the program about 2 weeks ago, tomorrow night, I think, maybe 3. And he called and said he couldn't do it. He was sick. He had been just stricken with something, and he couldn't function. And we're going to bring him on and find out more about this. He called today and said, I'm okay now. I'd like to come on the program and tell my story. And we're glad to have you back on, Joe. And I'm honestly glad you did not have to go into the hospital. Welcome.
Hi, Jeff. Well, I just, like I told you before, I went through really something that was a very, very horrible experience. I never was so deathly ill in my life. I was very afraid. I was home. I was isolated at home. My doctor, Dr. Fernandez, told me to stay at home. Don't travel anywhere. Don't go anywhere. He said, especially to the hospital, because he said, you're going to be virtually lost there. So your family's not going to be able to see you. You're not going to see anybody. And he says, there's really nothing that we're going to be able to do for you. So he said, you're not going to get any real treatment. So he said, you're better off staying home. And I treated myself home, and I just, like I told you before, I was on my knees here thanking the Lord Jesus for saving me from this, because it was a very, very horrible experience. I think I was even having delusions here when I was here. It was very, very bad. I've had the flu before, and I've had other colds and viruses, but nothing like this. And I just wanted to tell your listeners too that I really thank God for Jeff Rense. He's a very, very compassionate, kind man. He sent. Sorry, get a little choked up,
That's okay, Joe.
Something. He sent me the Allison C, and I'm really thankful for him for sending me these wonderful supplements. And I didn't even have the money then because I was home, and I was trying to get my money. And Jeff was kind enough to send me that. And I had my sisters, thank God for them, they had come up. I'm in my apartment by myself, and they sent me vitamin C and zinc and selenium and other natural herbs and things like that. Cat's claw. I just wanted to tell people these other supplements that were very helpful. There are things out there I wanted to tell the people that are very, very helpful and do work. I don't know why they're not advertised, but I guess because the pharmaceutical company is so powerful that they don't want them advertised, but they do work. They do work, and
there's no money in it for them, Joe, unless they can. You've seen the stories how they mark up pharmaceuticals 50,000% over the cost of production and manufacture. Something like that in many cases, 10,000, 20,000. Well, I remember one clearly was over 50,000. And I should also mention right now that Joe is very fortunate to have a fabulous doctor. This man, I've spoken to him, and he really is an enlightened human being and a totally dedicated healer. So that made a big difference for Joe as well. This, when I talked to you several times while you were sick, and let's get this on the table too. Joe did not get tested. Bottom line is he didn't need to. He knew what happened, and I knew what happened, and his doctor knew what happened. He got coronavirus. Okay. Now you said at one point you felt like a lead. What did you say? A lead weight or lead in bed, something like that. You couldn't even move.
I was without any inertia, any power to propel myself. It was like almost being frozen there, frozen to your bed. The only thing that actually got me up at times, because my sisters had come over here one time, and I was having a terrible time even sleeping. I couldn't sleep because of the body aches. So I was up for quite a while, maybe days, before I passed out. I passed out just from exhaustion, but I felt so weak that I couldn't even move. But then my sisters, I guess, they weren't hearing from me. I had shut off my phone. And one of them they got concerned and came here. And she pounded on my door, and I jumped up. Out of just being nervous, and I was able to stagger to the door. But I was staggering in my house. I could not stand up. Whether it was just because of a lack of sleep, also not just because, but the lack of sleep that it caused. Because there's no way I can get comfortable. No way. I tried back and forth to get myself in a position where I could be comfortable and fall asleep. It wasn't happening, due to the body aches and the cough too. And well, I'm not going to lie to you. I mean, I was nervous too. I mean, I was in a state of high anxiety also. But
when you talk about the body aches, I've read a few stories that it's like every muscle in your body hurts. You just hurt everywhere. Is that an accurate description in your case?
Yes, it was. That's definitely the case. And, I've had other, I had physical injuries because I got hurt on the job, and I hurt various other body parts, my feet, my back, my chest and stuff. And I noticed that those injuries were like amplified. I already had them, and they were already hurt before, but they were amplified by this, and plus the one that I had hurt my ribs and my chest because I felt it was around my heart. So I was always thinking it was affecting my heart because I can just feel the deep, intense ache, and it felt, I could like feel it inside my chest internally. So I didn't really know what was going on, and plus I wasn't getting the sufficient rest. And I did not want to eat either. I wanted to add that. I couldn't even hear a commercial come on when I had the television on with food on. I would get very nauseous. I didn't
really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's very interesting. That I haven't heard. So an abject loss of appetite. I've seen a little bit here and there about that, but you didn't want to eat. Now that's a primal instinct. You eat to survive. And so it, among other things, took away your desire to eat. Wow. Well,
I had tremendous nausea. That's why too. So I had my stomach. My stomach had been bothering me. I was getting a lot of indigestion and just like I said, the queasiness. The queasiness was what was really, really
nausea. Sure.
Nausea. Yeah. It was really upsetting, and I took the Allison C, and I wanted to say, and I took some drops also, olive oregano. My sister had given me olive oregano and olive leaf extract, which was very strong, but that seemed to that combination seemed to do the trick. I mean, that really it made me feel worse at first, but I think it did the trick. It really helped me out in a lot of ways. So
you just didn't want any food in your system. Your body said no,
not at that time. Not for the first few days, but then afterwards, I did get one thing in my mind. I don't know. There's a where I live, they call this the Juniper Valley wrap, and I went and got that. It was egg whites and mushrooms and some turkey, and that's the only thing that I really could really crave to eat. And I had that with the mushrooms, and that's the first time I really had eaten it. And I was so thankful for that because one of my friends had brought it by, and it was a godsend. Really, when you haven't eaten, Jeff, and you don't want to eat. I didn't even have a thirst, too. I'll tell you the truth. My thirst wasn't really strong either. I didn't want to really drink anything, but I forced myself to drink the water. I have
very
an
important.
I forced myself to ozonated water. I was telling you about that. I had an ozone machine, and I ozonated my water, and I drank it. So I tried to do that as much as I could. But
very important that you hydrate. This is a really, and people do not think this is a flu. This is a higher level, devastating illness for those who get it. Now remember, 80% of the people allegedly who become infected, no problem. They don't need hospitalization. It's a cold, and half of those have no symptoms. They're completely asymptomatic. So they don't even know they have it, and yet they're transmitting it to others. That's part of the problem. Do you know many others, Joe, who are sick or who have had coronavirus so far?
I've only, thank God, my friends and my family, nobody, only one person in my nephew's wife, her mother, got it, but she was in her 70s already. She had a number of issues. She had breast cancer, and she had some other problems with her liver, and she just unfortunately passed away from it. She couldn't handle it. So I know of her. That's it. My other friends, thank God, nobody else had it. Only people at work I discovered later who called me and told me they were in contact with other people who they came across at my work, and they said they were exposed to it. So we work in a place where there's many people go in and out the doors. You know, there's plus, matter of fact, the traffic there with the trains. So when they had called me up and asked me to give information on the virus because they had a hotline, and I told them we were exposed to hundreds, thousands, of people.
Right, got it. All right, hold on, Joe. We'll come back and pursue that a little bit more. We have to take a little break. Talking to Joe Cimino in New York. Hold on. Okay, welcome back. Talking with Joe Cimino in New York City. And he has just come through what may well be the fight of his life, and he has defeated coronavirus. He's okay. Now, you were talking just a little bit about others in the office, and so many commuters, these trains coming and going, the doors opening. And I guess people were still riding the trains, fairly normally? What's the traffic like now, Joe?
Well, like I said, I really haven't been, I've only ventured out of my house just around my neighborhood because I really haven't been down to any train station. But
before you got sick, how was it before you got sick?
Oh, no, before I got sick, it was business as usual. I mean, they were all over the place. I mean, if you've been to New York and been to the subway and been to certain places, especially on the three, I think it's the number 4, 5, and 6 line that goes up to Bronx, that's jammed all the time. Jammed, where you can't even get on the first train. You have to wait for 2 or 3 trains to pass before you can get on. But, I didn't see anybody wearing any masks or anything at that time. And
wow. The Corona Express.
This was back in March. Yeah. So nobody was wearing that. They were still selling fruit upstairs on the fruit stand, and then I couldn't believe that because people are coughing and and touching and handling the fruit, but then it was gone later. Then a couple of days later, it was gone, the whole stand. But
how do you think you got? How do you think you got exposed? What do you think happened?
Well, I didn't know at first, but then one of my other coworkers who works inside the office, we were on the opposite side of the where the office is. We have another separate room, which is like a lunchroom. Right. And he had called me up, one of the workers, Chinese guy, Lin, and he called me and says, Joe, I got exposed to the virus. I said, really, how? And he said, the mailman, which we have a mailman who delivers mail intra transit, for certain each department. And he had come in there and he had told him, because he's friends with him, and he said to him that he was exposed and he was tested and he had the virus. So he goes in and out of there constantly. And when we're all in the office at the end of the day, ready to leave and sign out to go home. So it could have been I'm not saying it was that, Jeff. It could have been a number of things because people use our bathroom. We have a bathroom in the back and with a code on it. And people come in there and they're bus drivers and they're token booth clerks. There's motormen, there's conductors, there's policemen. Sure. Everybody was going in there.
Right.
So one of the bus drivers had come down even at one time before I had gotten sick. And he said, do you know in Maspert Depot, he said, all the dispatches, all of them have the virus. So I was shocked and I said, well, you work over there. I said, you go up there? And he said, no, I don't go up in the office there. But I said, yeah, but still, they can come down and inspect their buses. And I'm sure they did. And I'm sure they went on the bus, not knowing they were sick maybe initially.
Sure.
And, that virus was being spread by who knows who, for how long.
Could have been thousands of people. You just don't know. We know it hangs in the air. We know it hangs out. It survives on plastics, on stainless steel, and hard surfaces for days. 10 days.
Exactly. And you know what, Jeff, I wanted to say, this is no indictment of anybody. I'm not picking on anybody, but there's a lot of also foreign workers here, I would say, but they're here. They work, they got the transit job. A lot of them aren't, they're all from all over parts of this world. A lot of them are not very clean. Their habits aren't clean. They don't even wash their hands when they go to the bathroom. A lot of people notice that. So, I mean, this is just regularly without the virus. So, you have a situation here, like I know you've talked about, it's a little aside from this, but you have people coming here, illegal aliens, all these people all over this country, and going to various places, because we don't have no rules about who we let in here no more. They just come in.
No, they're called invaders. Yeah.
Yeah, and invaders. Yeah, I agree with that. It's really an army. So, I don't know who brought the virus, but I'm saying I'm sure they weren't of any help. They're waltzing in here. There's no Ellis Island like before to bring people to and to quarantine them before they come into the country. It's just a free-for-all.
Sure.
So,
all right. Very, very well explained and correct. When you actually were supposed to come on the program that night, and you called and you said, "I can't do it. I'm not able to do it." You were living through this essentially alone. You had some families. You were talking to people, family members, but still you're laying there day after day. And I know how sick you were. We talked a little bit. You may not even remember it, but you're facing this, you against your maker, so to speak, or you with your maker against the virus. This was a one-on-one kind of a thing. Loneliness. How did that strike you?
Oh, that's a very emotional. I get choked up with that because it affected me very deeply emotionally and psychological level. I can't explain it, but it kind of I was almost, when I was approaching nighttime, as things feel worse in the nighttime, as people usually know when they're sick, but I felt a real loneliness and a sadness, I felt that, and I felt maybe a little bit disconnected from my family because I was sick and away from them, and I know people are feeling that just regularly, not being sick the way everybody has to operate now, or staying away from each other. But this was even profoundly different because I was very, very sad too. My emotions were just so low, and I even had, like, I would say, brain fog. I felt, even when I started to get better, Jeff, when I started to improve and I wanted to go out, I only was able to sit down on the front stoop of my house when the sun was out. We haven't been getting any really good weather here up in New York. It's been unusually cold. 39 degrees it was this morning. But when it was 60, 65, I sat out on the stoop, got a little bit of sun, and I was able just to go back upstairs, but still weak, still not strong. I've been told by Dr. Fernandez, I'm weak. And I tried to take a walk. There's a CVS not far from here, maybe 2 or 3 blocks. I only could make it halfway. I made it halfway down to CVS. And I don't know if it was because I was anxious, which I'm sure that was part of it. I had like anxiety from not being out for such a long time.
Sure. And
I felt strange, but I felt out of breath. I felt out of breath and weak, and I said, I can't make it. I got to walk back. And I walked back, and I told Dr. Fernandez about that. He goes, wow. He says, he had told me, so he had made me a little nervous, but then he calmed me down. He goes, I just want to have you check your heart, because a lot of people are having other issues, it's affecting their liver, their heart, Yeah. Afterwards, so he said he wanted to have me come in and take an echo. But then I told him the next day I went out, I was able to walk about double that distance, five blocks, And he said, no, I want you to continue to do that. But I didn't continue afterwards because it was too cold out. It wasn't consistently staying nice now, So I was able to do some type of exercise that I do in my house. So I told him, he said, no, that was good. You have your strength. But, Jeff, I still was disoriented, believe it or not. I don't know if that's I was disoriented. I still didn't feel...
That's a very appropriate word, yeah.
I still didn't feel like myself. There was something not right. You know, you can feel when you're right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you don't when you feel right and you feel good, you're not thinking about yourself.
Right.
You know, that doesn't come to mind. But I didn't have any kind of feeling of not that I should say I was sick, but I didn't have the feeling of well-being.
Got it. How about temperature? Did you check your temperature often?
I had been checking my temperature, yes, and my temperature had been, when I was fairly sick, it was, the highest it had gone up to was 100.8, and that was the highest. It never went above that. It hovered about 1 to 2 degrees above, normal, 98.6. So I did have a slight fever, but I said I had those other symptoms. I did have a cough. I did have the body aches. I did have, I had nausea. I didn't hear anybody saying they had nausea or stomach problems. Excuse me.
How long would you say you were seriously ill with this?
Oh, I got it.
How many days?
I would say it was 25 days at least. 25 days, I would say, Jeff. I was very, very weak. It was the weakness that was getting to me.
You were supposed to be on the program on March 31st, Tuesday.
Right, yeah.
And here it is, April 27th. So that took a month out of your life, basically.
Yeah. Definitely, yeah.
It's very interesting that you never had a high fever. This virus does not usually, apparently, produce high fevers in people, which actually might be beneficial in some cases. I don't know, although it is said in the literature that this virus will withstand and survive autoclaves in hospital and doctor medical centers. So it's a very tough virus. Whoever put this together was pure evil and satanic in my view. This is a real bad one. I'm so grateful that you were able to tough it out and not go into the hospital. As you look back on it now, Joe, did you ever feel like there was a time when, let's just put your knowledge base aside for a minute, did you ever feel bad enough to where you thought you might have to go to the hospital? Did you get that feeling that badly? It sounds like you did.
Yeah, I did, Jeff, but you know what? I did get that bad where I was going to say I'm going to go to the hospital, but when I thought about it, I thought about it still, and I said, I'm going to be worse off in the hospital. I'm going to be more fearful there. First of all, I'm not going to be comfortable there, and believe it or not, if I said to myself, my family's around here, I can talk to them at least. I know they were worried about getting the virus. At least I was able to see them. They had their mask on. I had my mask on. And that's a psychological comfort, being able to see your family and they're praying for you.
I do think about that often. All the people in hospitals who are utterly isolated, can't see. So you see some pictures of some people able to have a window in their room and their loved one is outside in the bushes putting a hand on the glass on the outside and their loved one on the inside is doing the same thing on the other side of the glass. This is
very sad.
This is awful stories. Let me go back. I'm going to play another couple of minutes from this video of the nurse talking about New York City hospitals as being, in some cases, like a horror movie. All right? Her friend calls it insane murdering going on, and her friend is a professional frontline nurse. So let's listen just a little bit more to this.
This is coming from my friend, who is in New York City right now on assignment, who went there to help, and this is what she's finding. It's a horror movie, she says. Not because of the disease, but because of the way it's being handled. She said we need help, and people are sitting there waiting in the hotels. Money, I guess, it's being paid for by FEMA, and yet they're still understaffed. And there are hundreds of people, hundreds of nurses in the hotels waiting to be called onto a shift. So there is manpower enough if the goal were to actually save people. But resources are not being utilized properly or to full capacity in a way that maximizes the patient benefit or improves the outcomes. The records and charting are crap, And now some of these hospitals in New York City are probably crappy on a good day. So you add in the fear of COVID and the fear of the whole pandemic and forget it. So if you're in a crappy hospital with crappy nurses, let's face it, all of us nurses have worked with crappy nurses before who don't care. So now you add in this, forget it. And they're having people do things that they can't do. So maybe things that they're not proficient in. So maybe a nurse who's not familiar or comfortable with using a ventilator. And it's that figure it out mentality. Figure it out. These patients are critical and they're crashing. Figure it out. So nurses are being celebrated as heroes, right? We see how like the fire trucks and the police are like lining up and practically having these parades and celebrating them as heroes. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure in some parts of the country and other ICUs, I have friends that are working on the front lines in ICU and they are good nurses. And some of them are heroes. But we have nurses being celebrated as heroes who are killing people. They're not heroes. And they're being brainwashed to think they're doing something great just by going to work because they're brave enough to go to work. Well, what are you doing at work? You're certainly not saving people if you're not even running codes.
Okay, there you go. Again, you can see the whole video up. It's second story in headlines. That's enough, I think, to hopefully alert a lot of you out there that if you are unfortunate and you do come down with this high-level engineered organism, that you don't want to run off to the hospital. You know, you got a little fever, you don't want to go there. Because if they pull you in, it's not easy to get out. Let's just put it that way. And I think what you just heard Joe say is very interesting. Low-grade fever. 100 isn't much, and you were hovering around 100 much of the time, correct, Joe?
Correct, yes. And I'm traditionally, when I got sick, because I've always gotten high fevers all my life. Even my family, my mother had told me when I was not that much old, I mean, just a few months old, I must have got something that had 106 fever, and they had to put me in ice. Mm-hmm. So I would traditionally, when I did get sick later on, too, I always got high fevers. I never got low-grade fever. Always very high. But, you know, Jeff, I just wanted to iterate that again. You know, I wanted to tell you listeners, they said, what a service you're doing. I said, what a good man. And I told Dr. Fernandez that, and that's why he was glad to speak with you. And said he wanted to speak with you also more often. And I said, you know, I told the doc, I said, I got nothing to say about Jeff except good things. I was, you know, when I had got off the phone with you, and you had called me a few times, I was literally in tears here. Now, I don't know if it was the virus making me so soft and, you know, emotional. It was.
That's not soft, Joe. That's being human.
Yeah. And I was so thankful, you know, thanking God and praying and thanking him for people like you and Dr. Fernandez, because when I was here and I said, Jeff, you know, my faith, thank God, sustained me, because I was praying. I was literally on my knees here when I couldn't even get up. I was like, I said, you have to strengthen me, Lord. And when I had the Bible here, when I opened it, and I got to tell you, I opened to Psalm 116, and it said, the sorrows of death surrounded me, and the pains of hell got hold upon me. It said, I found trouble and sorrow. That's exactly what I was feeling. I felt like I was in hell. And then the next verse that went down a few verses says, you have delivered my soul from death, my eyes from tears, and my feet from falling. I will walk before the Lord in the land of the living. Jeff, that boosted me up so much internally. You couldn't believe it. Was like God himself came in and put strength into me, because I was completely without power. Completely. I couldn't believe that my heart was even beating. That's how difficult this was. And I said, my faith too, just to see that alone and get encouragement, it was a big boost to me.
What an amazing ordeal, and so many others are going through the same thing. I just wish that there was...
Interrupt you for a moment, Jeff. I'm sorry, but when you were telling me that, you know, there's people dying in the house alone that they're not even reporting.
Right.
You know, like hundreds. You were telling me at one time was 160 before, and then you told me it was 200.
200 a day.
Telling people.
We're dying in home in New York alone.
I mean, like you said, whoever, this is a biological weapon. My friends feel so. Everyone that I speak to feels so. And I believe it was sent to really to ruin our economy and to make the American people fearful, put them in a fearful state, which it did.
It's done all of that and much more. This is going to be something that it took a long time for us to recover from the Great Depression. There's a parallel here. This is going to take a long time to recover from. And what the controllers are looking to do is to make sure when we recover to a normal, quote, normal lifestyle as determined by them, not as it used to be. They want a new world order here. And that's
so they're really trying to change the paradigm.
Right.
And unfortunately, you know, I mean, I did tell you I spoke, well, fortunately, I do speak to a lot of people, my friends, and, you know, they're realizing so much. But we need more, I guess we need a lot more people who are like the founding fathers and these patriots of years ago who really were aware and very, very wise and very intelligent and psychologically aware of these people's tactics, you know, because people are anesthetized now with all these video games, with all these entertainment, you know, that's basically like people don't think no more.
Screen time. No, they're staring. They react. They stare and they react. They don't proact anything. It's not a proactive lifestyle that is being inculcated into this culture. It's a reactive, a Pavlovian reactive lifestyle. That's what they want. I'd like to also point out at the very top of headlines, there's a space, then there are a couple of stories above that. The very top story under headline news is about, this is no joke, the Russian GRU, the military intelligence agency of Russia, is as good as it gets. They are superb. These men and women do not speak out of school. When they speak, they're cleared to speak or they don't speak. And you'll find a video at the very top, and it says in the headline, veteran Russian GRU military intelligence colonel says the coronavirus pandemic is misdirection. It's all a lie. The virus and the world financial crisis are inextricably linked to each other and must be considered as a, quote, global strategic special operation, end quote. That's from the Russian GRU. And I have a hunch that Vladimir Putin very well may have okayed that colonel to make the statements he did. I urge all of you to look at that and share it, spread it around, because the issues are absolutely explained in black and white. Joe, thank you so much for being here. I'm so very grateful you're better. I was very concerned. And
I'm grateful to have a friend like you. I'll tell you that. I thank God, Jeff, and God bless you.
Thank you, Joe. And you keep getting better. Give my best to your family and to Dr. Fernandez.
So thank you.
All right. Okay. Good night, Joe. All right. There's one story out of a whole lot of stories.